Okay, on the podcast, world-leading new marine protection areas in the already plundered Hauraki Gulf. One law for all. Not quite. So we can't fish or take marine life from that part of the Gulf. It's not that simple. I can't, and you can't, but commercial fishers still can, and so can iwi, with customary rights. And the entire Parliament voted for this. Off limits? Sure, for the bloke in the tinny. Also, Māori wards are voted down in Auckland. I have exclusively the reaction from Tauhenere, who threatens to block everything that the council wants from here on in. He's angry. He's really annoyed. My panel joins me as well, Ashley Church and, of course, Morris Williamson. That's coming up.
Are we paying these people to front up, or are we paying them to fly to Wellington to eat their lunch? Should you really lose your career for refusing to take part in a 90-minute lesson about Māori culture? This government doesn't actually have any idea how to get economic growth. Show us what you made of, Prime Minister.
Editor-in-Chief with Duncan Garner.
Duncan Garner, Editor-in-Chief, proudly sponsored by the Brothers Green. Unlock the innate power of New Zealand botanicals to support your mobility. Try the Brothers Green New Zealand Move Joint Support Tonic and join over 20,000 other Kiwis experiencing easier movement. For as little as $1 a day, you too can experience the power of New Zealand hemp seed oil for your joint health. Head to brothersgreen.co and use code DG20 at the checkout for 20% off your first order. It's a good one. Always read the label. Take as directed. Supplementary, of course, to a balanced diet. The Brothers Green, Christchurch. Okay, g'day, good evening. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Duncan Garner. Nice to have you here and nice to have your company. Please subscribe, and you can also text my name, Duncan, to 3598 and sign up for $7.99 a month. That'll bring you bonus episodes, interviews, slam dunks, Ask Me Anything episodes, and lots more things there for subscribers. So I really appreciate your support. Thank you so much. But first, what sort of new protected marine area is it if some groups or certain groups still have access to this special protected area? And should not a protected area at sea mean just that? So no iwi, no commercial fishing, and no recreational fishers in these spots. You'd think so, right? But National just passed this new law, setting up new protected areas in the Hauraki Gulf. But what it really means is guys like me have to sit it out. But not the powerful commercial guys, likely donors to the big parties, and not iwi, because National wants to uphold their customary access rather than treat iwi like every other New Zealander and say to them, go elsewhere, just not here. Sorry, we're changing that. It's a dangerous, dangerous path to follow, I reckon. Imagine watching commercial guys and iwi go fishing in these protected areas while we can't, so we sit on the outside of it just watching. Is that New Zealand that you know? Is that fair? Let's go.
It's the Slam Dunk.
Okay, let's call this what it is. It's a con job. The new Marine Protections Bill. Hang on, sorry. The fishing ban for white New Zealanders with a small fish boat. Or is it the marine fishing spots for Māori and for commercial operators only? That's what it is. Let's call it. Never again can National use the slogan, one law for all. This law makes a mockery of what National used to stand for. Now National's so weak, so keen to please the easily offended and the money men, that it comes up with these new marine reserves, protected reserves, and we all know what that means, no fishing, right? Well, it still means no fishing unless you're Māori or a commercial operator. The so-called Moana rules for the Hauraki Gulf is a shiny political sales pitch with a rotten core. It pretends to protect the ocean while carving it up for the insiders. They call them high protection areas. Sounds good, right? Not that high, though. Marine sanctuaries, healing the moana. Bold environmental leadership, they say. Not quite. These zones are anything but protected. Do you know why? Because the government has just rammed through these late amendments that let both iwi and commercial fishers keep fishing in the very areas they told us were locked down and to be protected. You heard that right, yeah? Marine protection, except, of course, for the people they want to keep on side. Let's break this down. Commercial ringnet fishers, a tiny elite group, get a special pass to keep fishing inside protected zones. How on earth did this happen? These guys have access where everyone else is banned. Iwi and hapu, they get ongoing rights to customary fishing, even in areas that the law says are meant to be off limits because they've been overfished. Recreational fishers, that's me. Mum and Dad with the tinny, the young fellow learning to fish with Granddad. They're shut out completely. So here's what you're left with. A two-tier ocean policy where your right to fish depends entirely on your identity and your industry connections, one or the other. If you're a treaty partner or a commercial operator with clout, the rules bend for you. If you're an ordinary New Zealander, suck it up and piss off. Stay home. Watch the fish come back on YouTube. Have a look at the fish on YouTube. Are we all in this together, New Zealand? Not quite. Or are we dangerously saying, you yes, but not you. You yes, but not you. You yes, because you're the right race. You yes, because you're in the commercial game. You no, because you've got a 14-foot sea nymph. Now, I go out on the boat with my son. He happens to whakapapa back to Whanaupanui on the east coast and Tuwharetoa, central North Island. So could I go fishing with him? And can he fish off the boat and I can't? Is that what it would be like? Is this what it comes to? What's Māori? What happens if a boat has got some customary guys on there and some Pākehā? Civil war, here we come. Let's get real. You don't get to call something a marine sanctuary if people are still allowed to throw nets and take fish out of it. That's not a sanctuary. That's a fishing ground. This is environmental theatre. The bill sells itself as a conservation win, but it's riddled with carve-outs and double standards. Protected zones should mean no fishing. No exceptions. That's the whole point. Let the ecosystem breathe, bounce back and rebuild. Isn't it? Like the Rahui. Instead, the government's handing out backdoor keys to the very groups it promised would be locked out. This isn't science-based. This isn't treaty honouring. This is political cowardice dressed up as green policy. Let's be honest. If Pākehā commercial fishers got exclusive access to protected zones while iwi were banned, this country would be on fire with protests, and rightly so. But reverse it. Allow iwi access, lock out everyday Kiwis, you, me, all the other boaties, and suddenly it's a progressive policy in a marine reserve. That's not justice. That's not treaty partnership. That's tokenism mixed with corporate appeasement wrapped in a flax basket and sold as somehow fear. It's not fear. The mainstream media is too pussy to call it for fear of being labelled racist. I'm going to call it. It's what it is. It's divisive racist crap masquerading as a progressive law. This is masquerading as marine protection, but somebody needs to tell the snapper to lie low because it's a false sense of security. Watch out for the nets and the local iwi. They'll still get you. Meanwhile, the small-time Kiwi who wants to feed his family with a rod and a reel gets told, sorry, not for you. Ross, go away. The government wants to please everybody, iwi, green voters, commercial operators, so it's tried to stitch together a Frankenstein bill, but instead of leading, it's picking winners. It's using the language of protection while handing the keys to the ocean to a select few. And the worst part, the ocean doesn't care about your politics. It doesn't know what your whakapapa is or your business model. It just knows one thing. It's still being fished. Here's the truth. The bill is a betrayal of the public who were promised real marine protection, a betrayal of recreational fishers who bear all the burden while others get exemptions and access, and frankly, a betrayal of what the ocean actually needs to survive. You want a thriving moana? You want a thriving sea, a thriving fishing ground? Then stop playing favourites. Ban all extractive fishing in protected areas. No exceptions. That's what real protection looks like. A one law for all New Zealanders. This isn't protection. This is privilege codified in law. And we should all be furious. The laws are fraud. A fraud on the public, a fraud on marine protection, and a fraud on the very idea of equal treatment under law. National says they believe in one law for all. Prove it. Fix it. Ban all fishing in protected areas. Or stop lying to the country, because right now the only thing being protected is hypocrisy.
Editor-in-Chief with Duncan Garner.
We've all been there, right? Come home from a long day at work, sit down and then get the inevitable what's for dinner. Being too tired to cook or even drive to the shop, Uber One is your answer. Joining Uber One gives you $0 delivery fee on eligible orders, 5% Uber credit on all rides, and exclusive offers through Uber, Uber Eats, and their partners. And if you sign up before the end of the year, you'll also get $10 off Uber cashback. Wow, that's pretty good, isn't it? Join Uber One today and start reaping the benefits. It ends December 31st. T's and C's, a minimum spend and fees apply.
Editor-in-Chief with Duncan Garner.
Right, my panel today, Ashley Church and Morris Williamson with us. They join us now. Gents, g'day, nice to see you.
G'day.
Mate, 27, 28 degrees here in Hawke's Bay today, so she's a good one.
Should be doing it from outside then. We should next week. You do it from outside.
We should.
Yeah,
we should.
It's not like that in Auckland. Morris, I might kick things off with you this week. Winston 1, Chloe 0. I'm sure you can be a lot stronger than that.
Oh, I mean, the guy has literally played a blinder. Go to the United Nations just before we get this sort of peace deal put together, and puts it like, if we get this sort of thing going, you know, we get the boundaries sorted, a government in, Hamas lay down its arms and the hostages return, then New Zealand will be in. And of course the lefty are all screaming, this is dreadful. And guess what? Only a week later,
bang,
the whole movement is in the... I mean, you couldn't play a blinder better than this in terms of timing. What he laid out in that speech he needed to see happen before we moved was all in the peace agreement that Hamas, theoretically, I'm still being very cautious, but theoretically are agreeing to in Qatar at present.
He looks like the man you can trust.
They're in Cairo, I think.
He looks like the man you can trust on these big issues. I look at anyone else in this government and he's the guy you turn to on these issues.
Oh,
Well,
look, increasingly so for me. So, I've been a huge critic of him for a long time, and I've done pretty much a 180 over the last little while as a result, primarily of what he's done with regard to New Zealand's position around Gaza. Look, I'm not quite as optimistic as Morris with regard to the so-called peace agreement. All I've done at this stage is agree to phase one, which is that they'll release the hostages, the remainder of the hostages, 28 dead, 20 alive, next week. I don't trust Hamas as far as I can throw them. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I don't believe this will happen for the simple reason that there's been something like 16 offers of a state to various different Palestinian authorities since that 1937 with the Peel Commission. Not one of them has actually landed, and in each case it's been because the Palestinians pulled away. Anyway, quick side note to this though. Playing as a backdrop to all this, we have the incident last week with a protest outside Winston House and an act of violence, a throwing of a wrench through his window. All hell's broken loose in respect of that for two reasons. One, because Winston's basically claiming, I think with some degree of validity, that this has happened as a result of the Greens' hyperbole and rhetoric around Palestine, Gaza over the last couple of weeks. Chloe's denying that and saying that you can't link the two things together, and that her vile rhetoric, which she's been espousing for the last few months, hasn't actually contributed to this. Playing against that is the fact that the person who actually leaked Winston's address was a woman, a Green Party member by the name of Acacia O'Connors,
Standing beside him.
who, by the Who, by the way, I wonder if Acacia O'Connors would be okay with with a crowd of pro-Israel supporters out her house throwing things through a window. I suspect she would.
Of course not.
But I do have some sympathy. Just to finish, I do have some sympathy with Chloe, only in the sense that if you're looking to see who's ramping up rhetoric against Israel, pick your poison, because it's not just the Green Party; it's media who have basically become an outsourced adjunct of Hamas here in New Zealand. It's the various different vile views on both the right and the left, with the conspiracy theorists, and of course it's the Green Party themselves. So either way, Winston wins. Winston emerges from this as the winner.
And let me give you one more real clip. I spoke to Winston about something he had said in the Parliament to check it was correct. He said that the Italian Navy had offered to take all of the goods that were on board this flotilla, all of the aid and whatever food, and they would deliver it. And he said he spoke to Prime Minister Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy. She even named the admiral and the boat, the big ship, I don't know what its name was, big warship that had got clearance to go into Israel, and they would take it all. And they went to the flotilla people and they said, we will be able to take all of what you're taking as aid into Gaza. And they said, no, we want to do it. And they did it because it was purely showboating.
Yep.
That's the best test. If they weren't showboating, if it was just to take help in. By the way, I've done a lot of sailing in my life on yachts. I look at a 56-footer or something like that with 15 or 18 people on it. There's not much bloody room left to put money.
Less than a truck. Less than a truck.
I reckon when the Italian Navy had loaded up, they would have got it into one small container.
In fact, the IDF actually answered that question, Morris. The IDF came out and they said, because obviously they commandeered the whole thing, and they said that the entirety of the supplies that would have been available for humanitarian purposes would have filled less than one truck from the entire flotilla. This was entirely optics. This was entirely about trying to make a point. It had nothing to do with humanitarian aid.
And that lovely Greta Thunberg lady, who's I think wonderful, she's decided that climate change is not really worth worrying about anymore. We're going to get into this one. And, I'm going to be kidnapped. What I loved is in the morning they were going on about we have been starved, and in the afternoon they went on a hunger strike.
Yeah. Do you think there's Morrison, you've been an MP. Do you think there is justification for a new law to protect MPs in their houses? So it's unlawful to have protests outside of MP's house. It's just a difficult one.
Yes, I do. No, I do, and I'll tell you why. Because a lot of people, like Winston, lives very close to other neighbours who've got kids and so on, and they never signed up for politics. Nor did his wife. Jan shouldn't have been in that house with that sort of threatening outside. I do. Look, I've actually got one of the best track records about this. I ended up getting a threat in the mid-90s when I was doing the Maritime Transport Bill. The police did some checking through our phones because they left it on voicemail tapes, and we didn't have the electronic stuff. And they finally tracked it down to a rest or sort of a big boarding house in Avondale. And then someone said, you best check room 17. And under the bed, they found dynamite, gelignite, timers, fuses and everything. The guy had threatened to blow me and my family up. and I had to go to testify at court, and he went to jail for 5 years. He got 5 years jail. So,
Wow.
I mean, I just think that those things, you cross a line when you are intimidating or threatening. There are plenty of places to protest. Just down the hill from where Winston lives is Victoria Park, a magnificent big open block of land. Go and protest there. I will die in the ditch defending your right to legally protest. But I think when you get into that intimidatory and then start smashing front windows, and I see the guy who's being charged with it is pleaded not guilty.
He's pleaded not guilty this morning, but I also see actually that he is elected for a jury trial. And who's to say that, let's say that there's some suggestion that he's not part of any sort of pro-Palestinian group and he's actually part of the Greyhound Association.
Yeah, very cool. Interestingly, just as an aside to this, I see that the Free Speech Union, of which I was on the founding committee some years ago when they first set it up, and has been an extraordinary organisation over the last few years in terms of what, under the leadership of Jonathan Ayling, they've been able to achieve in terms of pushing back on the censorship that was starting to emerge in this country over the last few years. But their position on this is interesting, and it's one of the very, every once in a while they go so far of the ideological cliff that they actually take a position which I think that is out of step with society. And on this, they've come out and they've said that banning people from protesting outside MPs' homes, or indeed any homes, is a step too far, because that would be an infringement on people's rights to protest. And I think sometimes Free Speech Union, there's a difference between your ideology, I understand why you would make that,
practicalities,
and pragmatism, and actually and respecting that society, there is a point, and I would argue that this goes beyond it, where you've actually got to have some constraints on what people can and can't do.
Yeah, but the speaker has an apartment in Parliament, so if the speaker's staying in Parliament, that's his home, and then you couldn't protest outside Parliament, couldn't you? I mean, if you want to...
No, they can word it all according to things, because they were saying across the road you've got the Kate Shepherd building, and there's a whole lot of parliamentarians live in that. Those are so you couldn't protest on the Parliament grounds because that's outside. I think you can actually put the necessary wording in it. But I go back to what Winston's partner Jan must have felt. She's a lady in her 70s.
Yeah.
She's sitting there in the house, and she's got that till 10 o'clock at night. Right, and his house is right on the footpath. There's no gap between his house. That is wrong. You are just for what purpose you're doing it? I think the Free Speech Union have gone too ideological on this, and I never ban protest and allow it to happen wherever you like. But, well, actually, I'd even exempt the Harbour Bridge. But wherever you want other than that, and people know they're protesting.
Yeah, I take it off Harbour Bridge too. Harbour Bridge is off limits, I reckon, too, because it's a bit flow of people. Labour, the Greens to Party Māori. No surprise. They talked it up and then didn't vote for it. Didn't vote for this law, actually. So you say one thing, then do another.
Well, yeah, welcome to the world of Pacificans in the Labor Party. I mean, this is what they do. They say this stuff because then they put their finger in the wind to see which way the public opinion's going, and sometimes they ignore that and just do what they think their supporters want or demand. So, no surprises there. There is no principle to the current Labor Party. There is certainly there probably is principle to the Green Party, but it's a sort of principle that goes against every value that most people in this country hold. But Labor's position at the moment is don't talk policy, don't do anything that might scare the horses in order to keep those polls increasing in the hope that we can ourselves.
And they are. That's a good transition.
And they currently are.
And look at the polls. I mean, look at the polls.
But
they're not being hurt. The Greens are at 12%.
The real test I always apply when there's something like this personal is, what would I think of someone doing that in front of, let me think of who's on the other side that I don't really like, Jacinda Ardern's house. And I think she's got a right to have that privacy and that protection.
Yeah.
So if it applies right across the other side of the house, it should be for everybody. And if Labor thought seriously about it and they were back in government and they had one of their maybe female ministers living in an apartment that was right on a footpath and something comes smashing through the window and glass all over their dog, I'm not sure they'd say,
well, remember, Morris, you'll both remember this 20 years ago. Helen Clark's address was publicised by the Sunday Star Times. Remember, there was a boarding house to go in her street, and she kicked up a fuss, rightly so, and said, "Don't give out my house."
Correct.
Yeah,
and quite rightly so.
Yeah. Hey, interestingly, just a segue, you were about to talk about the polls and the current situation with those, Duncan, and interesting stuff. We look at the current Curia poll, the latest one, which is done on behalf of the Taxpayers Union. It's saying that National sitting on 29.6, Labor sitting on 31.2, Greens 12, New Zealand First 10.6, which incidentally is up, as everybody I think has predicted. So we've got, and there's nothing new in this. We've been having this conversation for several months about the changing tides of who might be able to form a government. But I'm giving this some thought, and I'll be interested in Morris's view on this over the last little while, because we tend to slag National and talk about the fact that they're not making the changes that people want or need. But I read an article that David Farrier wrote last week, and he talks about, and he doesn't give all of them, he just gives a list of the first 9 of them, of the things that are transformational. He compares what this national government's doing to the Key government, which wasn't transformational, let's be fair, it was basically a steady as she goes government. The Ardern government, which wasn't transformational other than it transformed national debt from whatever it was to 189 billion.
Transformed, right?
But he compares it. He compares it to what National's currently. I'll give you 9. The fast track approvals law, which turbocharged 200 or 300 projects that wouldn't have happened for years. Scrapping NCEA, which is a major reform. Huge. That was a big piece of legislation in the 90s, which is now being scrapped and replaced with something better. Legislating congestion charging, which I think most people would agree is a good thing. Planning law changes. This is the and RMA replacement. The RMA was a huge piece of legislation in the 90s. This government's essentially reforming that entire act and putting something new and better in place. Earthquake code changes, phonetics first structured literacy for kids at school so they can actually understand. Building Act changes, we talked about them a week or two back, and replacing petrol excise charges. Now that's just a small,
but nothing impacts cost of living today. Cost of living today.
And that's the point. So then you say to yourself, with that suite of dramatic change that's happening, why isn't that resonating? And, there's a couple of reasons. One of them is that obviously Luxon himself isn't resonating with the public, and that's clearly not going to happen. The second one is that those changes probably aren't going to show dividends for some period of time, beyond this current election cycle. And the third one, as you say, is that we're not getting the results with the cost of living, which is the thing that's preeminent in people's minds. And I could throw a fourth one in there, which may or may not be a factor, and that is that while being great on economic reform, these guys are still drinking the Kool-Aid when it comes to wokeism. But then you could argue that so did Key. Key was a pretty woke prime minister as well, and that didn't seem to impact on his popularity. So I don't know.
But he didn't claim to. He didn't say he'd get rid of it. Luxon indicated he'd get rid of it.
I want to give you an unbelievable moment in my lifetime, which I will never forget. You know where you were when John Kennedy got shot. I know where I was when this happened. We all got called to Wellington the day after the 1990 election. That no ministers had been announced. No one knew who was going to. We weren't still over on the opposition benches, and we got these briefings from the Treasury. Graham Scott and others came over to brief us, and they literally said, "I know David Cagle published a budget earlier the year which said there was a $90 million surplus. There is not. It's around about a $3.5 billion deficit."
Yeah.
And I know the out years looked even rosier. They are not. It's about a 4.6 and a 5.8 billion deficit to go out. By the way, after this briefing, we're bringing in another Treasury team to brief you on the bailout's going to be needed for the BNZ. We're just sitting there, Bolger with sort of ashen face and looking like, holy hell, what has happened? And then Graham Scott said something that I will never forget. He said, you're going to have to take such unbelievably decisive action that we would actually be recommending a mini budget. They didn't happen, but he was saying at that time, if you are going to see any results of the big changes you need to put in place now, by the time you're facing the ballot box in 3 years, you cannot wait. You have to get and do it. So we went in and did the mother of all budgets. We promised we would get rid of the surtax. We didn't get rid of it. We increased it. We promised students wouldn't have to pay student fees. We actually increased them. We took away all sorts of bloody welfare privileges and rights. And the only reason we did all that ghastly stuff, you don't do that just so that people hate you. And we were hated. I think we dropped to 12% in the polls at one point. But you had to do it in order to get the green shoots going and get the place back and functioning. And we only got just re-elected in 1993, 3 years later. And we had to make Sir Peter Tapsell from the other side our speaker, or we would have been one short for the vote. But we did it. And these guys made all of that claim before the election. The Labour Party's spending like drunken sailors. They're accumulating debt. It is appalling, and everyone's going, yes, we're with you. And there's public servants bulging out of the buildings in Wellington. We're going to clean that out. And they did very, very little, if nothing. And I see last night the debt, they're adding another 6.3 billion to the 180. Yeah. And so in the end, that unfulfilled expectation is where they're lying. The number of people who went, yes, finally a government's going to get in and do these things, and good on them. And one last thing, I'll just add this. I get a lot of flack from ex-National colleagues and that saying, why are you attacking us? I thought you'd be on side. I said, I'm not attacking you. I'm pleading with you to do better so that the other lot don't get to see government.
It's a really good point. It's a really good point both of you make. Both of you make really good points there. And that's where the polls are at now, right? People are now blaming them for the current situation because they haven't fulfilled the expectation. In fact, and you actually said the stuff around the wokeism and all the sort of social settings and everything. They've actually gone along with that. In fact, I cannot go fishing out in these new marine reserves, but a local Māori can with customary rights. A commercial operator can. I can't. I thought National would even that sort of stuff out. They haven't. That's why people are disappointed.
So that's an interesting one, the whole customary rights thing. So you're talking about the new maritime areas, protected areas in the Hauraki Gulf. I have probably a different view to the rest of you, to both of you on this, and I'll tell you why. So
let's get it, Morris.
So when I look at
we don't tolerate alternative views in this.
Well, that's true.
Prepare yourself, Ashley.
So I'm assuming, and Morris will be able to correct me if I'm wrong. I'm assuming that the customary rights provisions that are in these changes will date back to the treaty settlements. I'm assuming it's either Ngāti Whātua or one of the subsidiary iwi or hapu that settled at some stage during the treaty process. So those will be built in. So that's the first point. Those are actually required by law. This isn't just the government doing something to give favour to one particular group. It's basically saying this is a legal requirement under the treaty. But here's the thing. Let me give you an analogy. So let's say, for example, I owned a house 100 years ago and I got ripped off. Somebody took their house off me. And 100 years, I didn't own the house, my ancestors did. 100 years later, I've taken that case to court and the court's agreed with me and I've come to some sort of financial settlement. And included in that financial settlement is a provision that for 1 week a year, I can stay in that house. And that's the way of sort of compensating me for the fact that I got ripped off 100 years ago. That's what's happening here. This isn't about the government giving favour to a particular race or tribalism or any of that other stuff. It's about a legal agreement that the Crown has struck, which it's honouring by virtue of
but they're trying to save the fish.
I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, but what they're saying here is that these reserves, this marine area is really under attack. We've got to save it somehow, and it's now or never. So you can't then say we're going to save it, but you two groups can still fish it. I mean, is it for marine reasons? Is it for ecological reasons?
Yeah, but what's your local hapu going to do? I mean, it might be a couple of sacks of fishing. It's not like it's going to deplete resources there over the next few years. Anyway, but
no, it's not that. It's the ability for the Māori guy to sit there in the boat and say "fuck you." Yeah, that's what they do. That's what's going to happen. That's what does happen.
I think, based on the interest of time, I'm desperate to raise you another issue, which is very much related. Two things. When I was earlier the Minister of Broadcasting, I did a number of broadcasting hui right across the country. I had Iwi Tara as my advisor and Toby Curtis. We sat down before we would go to a marae. That following week, they would teach me how to do all my greetings in Māori, how I would have to lay down the koha and then step back, how I would sit in the front row, but the two ladies in our team would have to be a row behind me, and Bridie, my PA, wasn't allowed to sit up beside me, etc. And we followed absolutely to the letter. And one day we did one in the Rotorua marae. It was middle of February. The heat was just... And I asked, could I move out of where they'd all sat us and move into some shade? No, you need to be sitting directly in front of the marae. I actually passed out. I actually was sweating so much in the heat, in a suit, in a black suit and so on, but they would not. Now, all I'm saying is, I went out of my way to observe the protocols that Maori had told us. When you come onto our marae, you have to do it, and I think they have every right to say you do it. Well, what about Parliament yesterday, where the rules are when the bell rings, you stop speaking? And for 30 years, I actually cut some sentences mid-sentence because the bell rings, that's it. And the new woman gets in and says, I hear you, and then went on. And then Jerry rings it again, and then he rings it again. She says, okay, I hear you, and then just carries on. Like, I'm in your house now,
and you said
but
that.
I'm not going to abide by your rules, but you come to my house, to the marae, you had better bloody... I've never known such arrogance.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I would never have ever thought to speak over when the bell rang in part. You get a 30-second warning and then the bell rings and you sit down. You shut up. One of the big changes I forced onto the Parliament, and David Carter did it in the end, was there's now a time clock up on the walls and you can see how much longer there is to go. In my day, you never knew how long you had to go, and you had to use your watch or something. But you stuck by the rules, and when the bell rang, you stopped. Oh, not her. She just went on and on.
Yeah, but that's what they've done all year. They've done it all year.
Then they have a pre-planned haka, and they do the haka. And I think this is so telling. They've asked the Maori Party leadership and this Irene Kaipara, did you know the haka was going to be done? Because it hadn't been given permission and broke all the rules, and Jerry had to suspend the house. And you know what their answer is? We're not prepared to answer. Yeah. Well, that's a definite we did. Because if they hadn't known, they'd say, no, we didn't know. They would say it.
Yeah, I'll come back into the fold, Morris, and agree with you completely on this.
Welcome back, Ashley.
I come back to I know, and hallelujah. But I'll come back to the same point that I've been making on the same issue over the last few weeks, and that is that the Māori Party aren't looking at Parliament. They're not looking at the Speaker. They're looking past Parliament
Correct.
at their voters. They're doing this for theatre. They're doing this because they recognise that every time they do this, and every time they give the Speaker to the establishment, to the Speaker of the House, and to everybody else, that they are gaining another tranche of votes of people who are going to vote for them at the next election. And this is entirely about that. It's a strategic move. It's a deliberate move, and they will continue to do it until the election.
Well, don't take the salary.
I absolutely get it.
Don't take the salary.
I absolutely get it. What I cannot stand is the hypocrisy. You come onto our marae, here are the rules. Women can't speak. Women can't sit in the front row. You will only speak when we tell you. You can only do this. You must come up and do this. Then you must say that. And now you sit down and we'll have 15 people reply to you in Maori and you listen for an hour and a half where you don't know a word of they're saying. And I did it every time. I sat there. I went back to the hotel room at the end of the day. Oh, bloody hell. And I did it because I believe that on their marae, their protocols should stand. And when you're in Rome, do as Romans do.
Well, what about...
But I also... That applies the other way around.
Yeah, but what about David Seymour?
When they come to our parliament.
Exactly. I agree with you entirely, 100%. It's arrogant. It's up themselves. They look like a bunch of arrogant pricks. But what about David Seymour goes to Waitangi and they take the microphone off him at their place? That's stinkingly rude too.
Correct. In fact, I saw a lovely big meme at the time. Big Maori guy holding a what? He said, "We are furious that we are furious that Chris Luxon has not come to Waitangi," and then underneath it, and we're even more furious that David Seymour has.
That's very good. That's very good. Hey, yeah, they need to sort themselves out because Jerry's struggling with that now. And good on him for taking a line yesterday, but this is going to continue. They are not going to play ball.
He has to. No. Well, you either have just total random chaos and let everyone do what they like. I mean, we should have someone from the National Party side just get up and speak, and when the bell rings, just keep speaking.
Yeah, imagine it.
So no, you've set a precedent. Set a precedent. It's all right to carry on speaking past the bell. I'm going to speak for another half hour.
Hey, did you nasty narrow-minded people on the Auckland Council vote down the Murray ward? Did you?
No, we did. We actually did because there was a proposal for Maori wards, and the debate went on for quite some time about, well, if we go to Maori wards, or at least give the voters a chance, because I said, no way am I ever allowing something that important to be decided by 20 councillors who may be all gone at the next election. This has to go out to the general public. And if it gets a mandate from the voters through a referendum, I'm with them. But I said, in return for that, we have to also give up the Maori Statutory Board, which is written into law, because they come and sit on committees. They're not elected. They get 2 votes on most of the major big committees. And I can give you a number of votes. I'll give you one, where we were putting a submission to Parliament on David Seymour's bill. Well, the original officials had put a bill which was to outline some of the issues that they were concerned at, but not take a stance. There was an amendment put that we will oppose David Seymour's. So the vote was taken to the 20 councillors, and it was defeated 11-9. So gone. However, then the 2 IMSB Independent Māori Statutory Board members voted for it and made it 11-all. And then the woke chairman of that committee, who's very left and used a casting vote, and our submission went off to Parliament saying we as Auckland Council are opposed to David Seymour's bill. But of the 20 councillors, a majority had said we weren't.
Unelected people get a vote.
Yeah.
Question for you, Morris, because when I looked at this, I read this as Auckland trying to gerrymander the changes that are being made to the Māori ward system so that the referendums will make a decision on whether they survive or not. I read this as Auckland Council getting rid of its current Māori wards. Clearly they don't have, and replacing them with Māori representation on each committee. So that's what you're telling me is that's not what's happened here.
No, it's quite the opposite. Since the legislation was passed in 2010, Peter Sharples and Tariana Turia really twisted John Key's arm because Rodney Hyde, who was in charge of it, did not want to do this bit of the bill. He said no. They said, yes, you've got to have Māori having a seat at the table and a say. And so we have an independent Māori statutory board at Auckland Council since it was formed, where they are not elected, they don't face a ballot box, they're not out there like I've been today hauling down hoardings and making an idiot of myself going around kissing babies and so on. They don't have to do any of that. They are just appointed by their own little tribal groups. They come along and have an equal vote at those major committees as those of us who had to fight to get elected. and I find that wrong.
Yeah, I think it is wrong.
Really
That's not. It's just
I'm
like
really
the.
happy to put Maori wards out to the referendum, and if indeed the public wanted to have Maori wards and voted that way, I would be a supporter of that happening. But this is a mandated thing, so I then took a really strong case and fought like hell. You're not going to get both. They wanted to both have the Independent Maori Statutory Board with members on the committee under the statute of the Auckland Local Authority Bill.
Yeah, no.
And in addition to that, they also wanted to have the referendum where they could get Maori seats.
Right, that makes sense. By the way, you've just lost the late vote of any mother whose baby you kissed today.
Yeah. You know, I mean, how horrifically scary. I mean, imagine that, Ashley. Morris
What,
coming in here
Morris
for a
kissing
kiss.
their baby?
They love
fact,
me. They love
if
me
you
out
want-
here. They love me.
If you want their votes, don't kiss them. I would suggest.
I won't. No, kissing babies is off. I've got that. I'll write that down. Hang on.
Ashley, put it down. Yeah. But Ashley, you want to say something about the Reserve Bank?
Oh, yes. So the Reserve Bank's come out in the last couple of days and they've announced that they're going to set up something called a Financial Policy Committee, so this didn't previously exist. And the purpose of that committee, among other things, is to basically set the microprudential rules around bank stability settings. So that's things like the LVR settings, which are the loan to value ratio restrictions, the DTIs, which are the debt to income. I'm a rabid campaigner against those, and I'll tell you why. So it was Wheeler who introduced the LVRs, which came in first some years ago, and he introduced them at the time. I remember this vividly. He introduced them at the time, saying the reason they were introducing the LVRs was because they were going to reduce house prices. So it was now that didn't happen. House prices continued to go up for the next few years. Didn't make a difference. And then the Reserve Bank quietly, and I watched this and screenshotted it at the time, quietly changed their webpage and said it wasn't actually about reducing house prices. It was actually about market stability. Now, the reason I have a problem with this stuff, Duncan, is because at the end of the day, the decision about how much I borrow or anybody else borrows from the bank is a decision between me and the bank.
Exactly.
Nobody else. Now, prior to about 2008, you could borrow with a deposit as little as 5%, which means first-home buyers getting into their first home could actually afford to buy a home.
Yep.
These 20% rules are a nonsense. The DTIs, which are going to make that even worse, are a nonsense. I am an absolute advocate of saying not only should the Reserve Bank have no control over this, but if the banks want to lend people on a 5% deposits, that is their business and that of their customers.
And they did it, and they've done it well for years. They don't need this. They've done it well. They've got good ratios. They've got good financial reporting. We know how strong they are. They're some of the best in the world. Leave them to it. They're bright people with the knowledge of how to do it, right, Morris?
Yes. Oh, look, there's a couple of things on the Reserve Bank I want to get into. First of all, you're paying nearly $500,000 for a restraint of trade to somebody who is the Reserve Bank governor. Will he go to be Reserve Bank governor at another company? They don't have one. It would be like saying to the Governor General, if you leave early, we'll get a restraint of trade and give you $500,000. There's only one, and you're the only one.
It's a muzzle.
That has got to be the worst scenario I've ever seen. But the Herald article this morning, where they're setting up new Auckland offices, $32 million for rent. The minimum cost for leasing over $32 million. But listen to this, plus a $14.5 million fit out for their Auckland office. They've got this massive monolithic building in Wellington at number 2 or number 1 in the terrace. I'm not sure which side it's. But I mean, for goodness sake, this is again out of control. We are so important. We've got so much money, and we're going to spend it. And look at their staffing was like a 45 degrees straight up.
Yeah, this. And so they haven't changed. They haven't changed. They've still got the same DNA as when he was there. That's why the new governor's coming in.
Totally. When the Reserve Bank Act was passed 89 or 90, it was revolutionary. In fact, many other countries copied New Zealand and brought in a similar act about banking independence and all this other stuff. We had Brash, brilliant. You could take to the bank what Brash said. If he said something, that was what was going to happen. Followed by Bollard, brilliant Reserve Bank governor. Then we got Wheeler, and the slide started, and then we got Orr, and it became an avalanche, basically. So over the last 15 odd years, we've had the original groundbreaking international act, which changed the way that the banking system was structured in countries like ours to something which, in my view, is pretty much a need.
It's a muzzle. It's not a restraint of trade. It's a muzzle. It's to stop him saying what really happened. Something went down, and I reckon this government knows. This government will know. Nicola Willis is in charge of. She's the minister responsible. Yeah. She will know. Someone will know something, and I reckon they've all lied. They've all haven't told the truth here.
But guys, I want to go back to one thing that I really hung on in Parliament. I actually said many times when people are beating up me on the other side, I said, you're my opponents, you're not my enemies. Enemies are people you have on your own side, but you're my opponents, and I don't hate you. I debate you and I don't hate you. And I said, I've only thought about this a lot, and I really think there's only one thing I hate in the world, really only one thing, and that's monopolies. because they can do what they like to you and you get no say. Reserve Bank is a monopoly. And for spending the fit outs and spending the money for this and spending on that and increasing the staff through the roof, there's got to be, there is an Auckland International Airport that's got all sorts of rules about what it can charge based on its total capital investment structures and all sorts. But you've got this organisation that can just blow out topsy-turvy. And I'm delighted that Nicola Willis took a blowtorch to try and bring them back. I think there's still a lot of room for that to be done.
I do.
By the way, I'm withholding judgment on the new Reserve Bank Governor, Duncan. I'll watch for the next 5 or 6 months and see whether or not she's just a continuation of the same incompetence that we've had over the last 15 years, or whether she's a breath of fresh air. And if she is, all power to her.
Yeah, I agree.
My jury's out too. You have to let her get into the job and see her perform and see what happens. God, I mean, she's going to have to look good, isn't she? Because the last guy looks so bad. I mean, how could you take it down from where it is? I mean, seriously, I'm going to leave it there, guys. Brilliant. Okay, it is time for some letters to the editor. And what have we got here? I've got a couple in here. Here we go. This is from Gary, who says, "G'day, Duncan. Hi. I'm just an old Kiwi guy sitting at home watching the worldwide disruption in regards to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict being waged. In regards to this, I would suggest that unedited and raw footage filmed and posted by Hamas itself be televised in all its savagery unedited. Maybe this would show the people of New Zealand that Chloe and her ilk are misjudged imbeciles. I could go on about the Greens' hypocrisy, but I would hope that's obvious to most clear-thinking people." Right, folks, that is us. Thanks so much for following the podcast. And you can get hold of me, of course, Duncan at rover.nz. Thank you, Lockie. Thank you, Brody, for all your hard work. Two talented men just trying to do a good job. Two simple Kiwi men doing a great job. Thank you, boys. Please subscribe if you can, and you can also text the word Duncan to 3598, and that will get you through to the link. You pay $7.99 a month, and you get all the bonus episodes, interviews, Ask Me Anything sessions, the whole thing. We really appreciate it. If you can do that, we stay around longer. You trust the mainstream media, or do you trust us? If you trust us, sign up. We really appreciate it, and it keeps us around a lot longer. Remember, life's no dress rehearsal, no curtain raiser. This is it. We live in one of the best places on earth, so get out and enjoy it. Enjoy your fishing. If you're in a fizz boat, you're a white fella, you may have to go to the shop because you're not going in the water. Take care, folks. Ta-ra.
Editor-in-Chief with Duncan Garner.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Duncan Garner, Editor-in-Chief, sponsored by the Brothers Green. Feed your gut what it needs. Digest Gut Health Protein Powder. I use it myself. It supports natural digestion and gut health. Made with premium Canterbury-grown hemp powder and a unique blend of active kiwifruit enzyme powder and kiwifruit skin extract, offering natural prebiotics and a nutrient-rich profile to complement a balanced lifestyle. Always read the label. Take as directed. Supplementary, of course, to a balanced diet. The Brothers Green, Christchurch.